Introduction to the tragic narrative. The prologue of Strife, the story is set in fair Verona, where an ancient, deep-rooted feud between the Montague and Capulet households erupts into fresh violence. This persistent conflict creates the backdrop for the star-crossed love of Romeo and Juliet, whose eventual deaths serve as the final, tragic resolution to their parents' long-standing hatred. The dramatis personae. The play centers on two prominent noble houses, the Montagues and the Capulets. Key figures include the star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet, the impulsive Tybalt, the witty Mercutio, the patient Friar Lawrence, and the authoritative Prince Aeschylus, whose rule attempts to restrain the bloodthirsty nature of the warring families. The spark of conflict and affection. A public brawl. The narrative opens with a volatile skirmish in a public square between the servants of the two houses. Even when the heads of the families, Montague and Capulet, arrive, the fighting remains intense until Prince Aeschylus intervenes, sternly warning that any future disturbance of the peace will be punishable by death. The unrequited love. Romeo, initially introduced as a melancholy youth, pines for a woman named Rosaline. Seeking to cheer his cousin, Benvolio convinces Romeo to attend an upcoming banquet hosted by the Capulets. This decision is driven by the hope that comparing Rosaline to other beauties will alleviate Romeo's sorrow. The fateful encounter at the Capulet ball. Despite the danger of his presence, Romeo encounters Juliet. In an instant, his previous obsession with Rosaline dissolves. The two share an immediate, intense connection, unaware that their families are sworn enemies until after their first meeting, which culminates in the realization, "My only love sprung from my only hate." The development of secret love. The orchard meeting. Seeking to be near his new love, Romeo bypasses the high walls of the Capulet orchard. In the famous balcony scene, Juliet confesses her love for him, lamenting that his identity as a Montague is the only obstacle. Romeo reciprocates, and they exchange vows, agreeing to marry in secret the following day. A hopeful alliance. Romeo seeks out Friar Lawrence, a Franciscan friar, to perform the marriage. Though the friar is initially shocked by the sudden shift in Romeo's affections, he eventually agrees to the union, hoping that the marriage of the two children will finally bridge the divide and turn the families' rancor to pure love. The arranged ceremony, with the nurse acting as a clandestine intermediary. Romeo arranges for Juliet to meet him at Friar Lawrence's cell. The wedding proceeds in secrecy, briefly uniting the two houses in a private pact that exists completely hidden from the public conflict of Verona. #Eesh. Violence and exile. The fatal duel. Shortly after the marriage, a confrontation occurs between the aggressive Tybalt and the quick-tempered Mercutio. Romeo, now kin to Tybalt by marriage, attempts to keep the peace, which leads to a tragic mistake. Mercutio is fatally wounded under Romeo's arm. In a fit of grief and rage, Romeo pursues Tybalt and kills him. The prince's verdict. Following the deaths, Prince Aeschylus arrives to find the streets stained with blood. Rather than ordering Romeo's execution, the prince sentences him to permanent exile from Verona. This turn of events transforms the secret marriage into a source of immense grief, separating the newlyweds almost immediately after their union. The night of parting, Romeo sneaks into Juliet's chamber to spend their wedding night together. As dawn breaks, they are forced to part, with Romeo fleeing to Mantua to await the friar's word. Simultaneously, Lord Capulet, unaware of his daughter's marriage, decrees that Juliet will wed Count Paris on the coming Thursday to help her move past her perceived mourning for Tybalt. #Ace was the desperate remedy. Desperate to avoid bigamy and reunite with Romeo, Juliet turns to Friar Lawrence. He provides her with a potent potion that will induce a death-like coma for 42 hours. The plan is for Juliet to be placed in the Capulet tomb, from which Romeo will rescue her after receiving a letter from the friar explaining the ruse. The failed communication. The tragic irony reaches its peak when the messenger fails to reach Romeo in Mantua. Instead, Romeo hears of Juliet's supposed death from his servant. Distraught and believing his wife to be truly gone, he buys poison and returns to Verona, determined to die by her side in the vault. The final sacrifice. Upon arriving at the tomb, Romeo encounters Paris and kills him in a brief fight before consuming the poison. Moments later, Juliet wakes to find Romeo dead, and, unable to live without him, she takes her own life with his dagger. The play concludes with the two families, horrified by the loss of their children, finally ending their feud. This summary traces the rapid descent of Romeo and Juliet from hopeful young lovers into the victims of a toxic familial war. Their journey highlights the destructive nature of hate, the fragility of young love, and the devastating consequences of impulsive decisions in the face of long-standing social discord.